Hello, Hex and Circle initiates, and welcome to the Roundup. I think it should be called a Roundup, not because we're collecting or recapping, but because we are rounding up the amount of knowledge we now have. Yes, I think I'm very clever. Chenyu Vale and Lantern Right both presented us with a ton of tantalizing little hints, but may have given us more questions than answers, which is, well, kind of typical if I'm going to be honest. Today's video is going to do a deep dive on the importance of understanding the original Chinese context of the word Adepti, as well as discussing some of the interesting tidbits brought into a new light from the book series Records of Jueyun with regard to the chasm and the civilization that once dwelt there. I'll be talking a little bit about Zhongli and even, well, Chinese wuxia stories and their cultural significance and impact as it relates to Genshin Impact's story. I'm Ganymede, the meticulous scribe of the Hex and Circle, and today I'll be your guide through Chenyu Vale and beyond. Up until this point, I'd largely assumed that Adepti was just the colloquial name for Liyue's native elemental beings. However, something Fujin had to say seems to change our perception of Adepti entirely. Though my Chinese reading comprehension is elementary at best, a common and unfortunate consequence of not being raised within my own culture, I try to do my due diligence with understanding the original Chinese context of something whenever I can. This exchange with Fujin led me to want to dive into the meaning of the word we see localized as adeptus, as I just never thought to look any deeper into it until now. Luckily, the wiki itself has a whole section on this, and it almost immediately confirmed my suspicions. Fujin says that one is not born an adeptus, nor will they remain one indefinitely. This tells us that the word adepti is a title and a mantle worn, rather than what one is born into. However, in Liyue, it's kind of a case like this. All adepti were originally illuminated beasts, animals that gained power and sentience through cultivating immortality. These sentient animals, or illuminated beasts, are a huge part of Chinese culture. While all adepti were originally pure elemental beings in this form, not all illuminated beasts and pure elemental beings are adepti. We can see this in Chenyu, Cloud Retainer's story quest. The word adepti is a decent summarization of several terms that are central to Chinese fantasy, and sometimes in rare cases, even Chinese sci-fi stories. Honestly, this feels like a huge duh moment to me, and I feel silly for not realizing or looking into this sooner, specifically because I'm a huge fan of this genre of Chinese fiction. Look, I'll out myself and say I've been reading a ton of translated Xianxia and Danmei over the course of the past few years, and have loved every second of it. Therefore, these concepts were already pretty hard-baked into my brain, so maybe that's why I never thought to give the idea of what an adeptus is a second glance. That said, the general audience who engage with Genshin, and even those who love the lore, probably actually have no real metric or concept to understand exactly the significance of the true intent behind the word adeptus. So let's refer both to what the wiki says about the terms and my own knowledge of the genre. Here's the breakdown as it appears on the wiki, since I found it extremely illuminating. No pun intended. What exactly is defined by the term adepti is ambiguous and is further obfuscated by the English localization's translation of several related but distinct terms interchangeably. Xian, Xianren, Xianshou, Xianzhong, and Xianjia are all translated as adepti or illuminated beast. While the original Chinese text also does not clearly delineate the terms, there is more specificity in how they are used. Xian, illuminated immortal, refers to the concept of Taoist Xian, who are people or entities with either extreme longevity or immortality, typically as a result of spiritual enlightenment. The word can take on a variety of meanings depending on the context, but in the context of the adepti, it typically refers to beings who have reached enlightenment and spiritual immortality. In-game, within the context of Liyue, this term is used to broadly refer to all types of adepti. Xianren, Illuminated Immortal Person comprises the characters Illuminated Immortal, Person, People, Mortals. In game, this term is typically used for all Xian who follow Morax, whether they take beast like or human forms. It is an abbreviation of the Mighty and Illuminated Adepti, Chinese literally 3 eyes, 5 manifestations, illuminated immortal. The term does not specify singular or plural and can be used to refer to an individual adeptus or multiple adepti, although plural forms of the term exist as well. Xianzhou, Illuminated Immortal Beast, refers to animals and beasts who have or are capable of reaching enlightenment, such as the Qilin. Those who are illuminated beasts and follow Morax can be referred to as both Xianren and Xianshou. In the original Chinese text, humans with illuminated beast blood in their veins typically revert to their Xianshou lineage and not a Xianren lineage. There are a few exceptions. For example, when Ganyu talks about Adeptus blood and solitary fragrance, she uses Xianren instead of Xianshou. Her character stories always use Xianshou, though the English version inconsistently translates it as both Adeptus and Illuminated Beast. Xianzhong, Illuminated Immortal Group, generally refers to a subset of Adepti or to the Adepti as a collective. Xianjia, Illuminated Immortal Clan, is used in terms that pertain to the Adepti collectively, such as adeptal techniques or possessions. For example, the Chinese description of Eye of Perception says that the weapon belonged to the Xianjia. The term Xianjia Qiyun, Illuminated Immortal Clan's destiny, localized as adeptal energy and adeptal power, refers to a power which is harmful to ordinary humans. Notably, this is separate from Xianli, Illuminated Immortal Power, another term localized as adeptal energy. Xianli is the type of adeptal energy bestowed on the traveler during Turning Point and used in the Serenity Pot. Xianjia has also been used as an honorific form of Xianren. This is why, on my deeper look, I feel that simply calling all beings we know as Adepti is a bit reductive. I wouldn't call it a critique of the localization per se, but I do wish they could have found a better way to more clearly label and express the use of these titles. It might just fall into the category of things that are kind of untranslatable across cultures, though. There just isn't really a way to translate these honorifics in a concise manner that doesn't take away too much extra explaining in the text, especially in a language that doesn't have these types of titles or honorifics. So, while the Adepti largely represent the original pure elemental beings of Liyue, which feels really further implied by the Chenyu Vale world quest when one considers Fujin, Lingyuan, and Herblord, are all likely at least as old as the nail drop on the chasm, calling the Adepti akin to a race of people is probably not the most apt use of the term either. Some other explanations of familiar names and titles might make the usage of these terms more clear as well. Yanwang Dijun is Rex Lapis's Adepti name. It directly translates to the Sovereign Lord Rock King, and is slightly different from all of the other Adepti sacred names due to the use of this title. The character used and translated as Sovereign is the same character used to refer to the 7 dragon Sovereign Lords, so make of that what you will. Maybe all of this time we've been saying Zhongli isn't a true dragon, and that's been misguided. That would certainly make his extreme aversion to crossing paths with Neuvillette make even more sense. I certainly wouldn't want to be caught by the Justice Dragon if I betrayed my king and joined the usurpers way back in the day. But of course, the most widely accepted examinations of Zhongli's history and titles do seem to have most people believing that he was not one of the original dragon sovereigns. I like to remind everyone and myself from time to time that just because something is widely accepted by the fandom at large doesn't always mean that it will turn out to be 100% true, lore-wise. I mean, come on, think of the drama potential if Zhongli turns out to be one of the original sovereigns. Would make all of the times he said he can't speak due to contracts he's entered all the more interesting. I just think it would be extremely juicy story material if it turns out he, in fact, was always and has always been the Dragon of Earth. For another example, Shueyuezhu Young Zhenjun, is Mooncarver's full sacred name. Directly translated, it means the perfect lord who carves the moon and builds the sun. Liu Yuejie Feng Zhenjun is Cloud Retainer's full sacred name and means the perfect lord who retains the clouds by borrowing the wind. Here we see again the title suffix Zhenjun used. Anyway, I mostly picked 2 random Adepti to show the usage of how this title works. Now, this is important for us to understand because it comes from traditional Taoism, which I've mentioned in a few videos by now. Like I said at the beginning, these Taoist concepts are really embedded in Chinese fantasy stories as much as witches and wizards are in the West. But in China, you're more likely to travel by magic while sky surfing on your sword than while riding on a broom. When Fujin states that no one is born an Adeptus and no one will be one forever, this is the simple idea that one can cultivate to immortality, but the idea of becoming an immortal did not always mean one would live forever, and one could always fall from grace by failing a heavenly trial or being defeated by a nemesis or rival sect or clan, etc. Beliefs on how literally the idea of becoming an immortal was taken could vary from region to region, sect to sect, and master to master. In the case of the Liyue Adepti, and this being the fantastical world of Teyvat, immortality is kind of a given. There are many creatures and even races, such as whatever Klee is, that live much longer than normal humans. So in this case, the idea of cultivating focuses more on enlightenment. For non-human beings in Teyvat, this generally manifests as the ability to use elemental powers without a vision. This is only possible for non-humans and beings of the Bishop's Light Realm as far as we currently know. The Traveler and Albedo's defective, sibling are the only human-like beings we know of in Teyvat who have this ability. All others either fall into the category of gods, like King Deshret and Decarabian, the Lord of Storms, or are some form of illuminated beast. And we know that even the gods we know most closely, the Archons, generally have some original form that they came from that was not human. Currently, A and Makoto are the ones we know the least about in this sense, but it's likely that they were some type of yokai to start with anyway. Not 100% confirmed, of course, but the option that makes the most sense for sure. While the Archons were likely all in a sense natives of Teyvat, as in they were born there as far as we know, they were put into power to specifically undermine and overwrite the original natural order of the planet. This sentiment being heavily hinted at by most of Nouvelette's character stories and unlockable voice lines on the subject. Anyway, if you've never delved into Chinese fantasy media, there are a ton of fun wuxia and cultivator-based stories you can find even right here on YouTube, fully subbed, if you want a better understanding of some of the common tropes and general mood, as well as implications of the titles and words used surrounding the Adepti. I'm not going to go into individual titles and whatnot, or we'd be here all day. It's just one of those cultural things that I think having a little bit of knowledge of really elevates the understanding of Liyue's culture as a whole. I'm a big fan of the series Blood of Youth that you can find on Yoku Suspense here on YouTube, as well as, maybe predictably, The Untamed, which I think is still on Netflix if you want a couple of good starting points in the genre. Have fun out there. Moving beyond what we learned about Adepti themselves, Chenyu Vale also gave us a lot to think about regarding some of Liyue's ancient cultures, but perhaps provided more questions than answers if you don't know where to look or what lead connects to what. First of all, a viewpoint entry for Qizhang Wall in the archive tells us this. In the tales told by older folks, the ancestral peoples of Chenyu Vale migrated here from the far south, and they built a mighty ritual tower to touch the heavens and left many mighty temples. The Jade Tower is no more, and only silent ancient ruins stand amidst the thick fog that shrouds the mountains, watching over a secret none now shall know. I can't be the only one chomping at the bit for more conclusive answers about this lore. As far as I know, this tower to the heavens was only mentioned briefly once before. I spent over a week digging around trying to find the text I remember, but not even weapon material descriptions availed me. I swear it was somewhere alongside some other things civilizations were punished for, and was mentioned just very briefly, something like that time a civilization tried to build a tower to the heavens that was cast down. I remember it specifically because I take note of biblical references in Genshin pretty specifically, since Gnosticism is such a core theme throughout the story and often ends up having further significance. After a call for help on Twitter, user Lily3198 helpfully found exactly the little box of text that had stuck in my mind, thankfully, and it's from the description of the Sumeru domain Steeple of Ignorance and reads as follows. In the ancient past, man-made towers that could touch the skies were built all across the land. Though human hearts flowed downward, their souls aspired toward the high heavens. These towers would always fall or collapse under their own weight and plummet into the depths. However, if one were to look at things at a grander scale, the heavens and earth are as one. No direction is truly any different from another. This makes me wonder if it's a reference specifically to King Desheret's Tower of Betrayal, or if all across the land means all of Teyvat or not. This is written in a rather broad way, with wide strokes rather than connecting it to any one kingdom or dynasty, so perhaps this is a part of Teyvat's prehistory and ancient civilization we have yet to learn much about. That said, because I had already ticked this very thing for a revisit later in my mind at some point, I immediately did some digging and in-game archaeology. One thing said pretty prevalently here is that atop a mountain, the Adepti, including Rex Lapis, used some contraption to directly contact the heavens and speak with the gods at some point after or during the time period when the Seelie acted as Celestia's envoys. In the viewpoint description, it's directly described as a jade tower. While jade is everywhere in Chenyu Vale, there's only one place where the whole mountain, which has clearly been hit by something that was enough to nearly fully collapse it, is clearly made out of solid jade. The answer is obvious enough. Mount Laishan, where Chiwang Terrace and Carp's Rest is located, is pretty obviously a tower of jade, though it appears to be a natural formation for all intents and purposes. We know that the gods of Teyvat have been known to reshape the land and raise mountains, so the idea of this fabled tower being a natural one in appearance isn't that odd. In Chinese myths, many mountains and other formations have similar designations, such as being the palace of a particular deity despite clearly being a natural rock formation or lake or forest. This is the location where the vote of rain jade must be cast into the waters to soothe the ley lines with adeptal energy. But even the name of the quest that leads you up to the summit suggests its original connection with the heavens. Honestly, I felt rather teased by the implications in a way that felt rather anticlimactic for me, and I have a feeling we will absolutely revisit this area at another date on these little tidbits alone. Another thing Chenyu Vale gave us was the presence of several murals, but the last one is the most interesting and confirms what one could deduce from several legends in the area. The people of Chenyu Vale immigrated there from the chasm after the nail drop. The chasm nail is depicted in the final mural, as well as a green-robed figure leading the people and some similarly sized figures who were likely the Adepti of Chenyu Vale away from the nail, following what appears to be a river. We have long known that the people of southwestern Liyue, responsible for the ruins west of Mount Taiheng, suddenly left the area after the calamity 500 years ago, and that they lived largely underground as well as in the chasm itself originally. This is mentioned in records of Jueyun with the following passage. Hidden Jade. In the valley northwest of Liyue Harbor and south of Nantianmen lie many silent, ancient ruins. One of these areas is known as the Dunyu Ruins. This area is said to have already existed even before the time of the Archon War. According to old legends passed by word of mouth, Dunyu means the land to which beauteous jade flees. In a past beyond memory, when even Rex Lapis would still have been young, a star fell from the sky into the barren plains west of Liyue. These plains were transformed into a huge and deep chasm in the wake of that star's descent, and jade would emerge from within, beautiful and limitless, and it would become the foundation for 1,000 years of industrial mining in Liyue thereafter. Legend has it that when that nameless star fell, a fragment of it broke off and crashed into the rocks in northern Lisha. As most now know, wordless stones harbored soul and spirit, and in manners and times not witnessed by mortal eyes, they watched and listened to the ley line's pulses, the echoes of the alpine springs, and the slow but inexorable movements of the mountains. But unlike the ordinary but enduring stone of the earth, the fragments of the meteorite that fell from heaven had a proud and agitated temper. Later, when countless gods and rulers fought over the appointed celestial seats, and the very stars and abyss themselves faded, tragedy and evil embarred the breath of the waters and mountains. The fallen star could bear this no longer, and heedless of the great chasm's persuasions to stay, it leaped away towards the heavens. As it returned to the skies, the heavenly jade left behind a deep pit, within which humans could build great cities and mighty fortresses, finding refuge and shutting themselves in with the leftover inheritance of that fallen star. Over the tumult and storms of the next few thousand years, the redoubts of the Chenyu Valley stood tall and maintained prosperous relations with Liyue Harbor up until 500 years ago. But with the coming of the Black Calamity and the rise of the Abyss, the residents of Chenyu sealed the ancient city and departed for other lands. None know why these refugees chose to shut the gates of their home, and even the millennia-old Adepti and Yaksha are silent on this matter. And so the sealed fortresses became giant silent tombs, with naught left in them but the sound of pond water and the wind whistling through empty halls. And thusly, too, did they come to be called the Chenyu Ruins by the people of Liyue. This makes it seem as if there were then multiple waves of emigration from the area, as the first wave of people who left the chasm, likely responsible for the presence of the unified civilization ruins within it, were most likely the people who now inhabit Chenyu Vale. In the cases of the other celestial nail drops we know about, the surrounding area quickly became uninhabitable, or at the very least extremely harsh climate-wise. But in the case of the chasm, it seems that the nail mostly only caused widespread terrestrial damage before seeming to move of its own accord deeper into the mines much later, as mentioned in the Chasm World quests. For the most part, this nail, perhaps, is the only one that seemed to actually function as intended without causing widespread leyline disorder, though it no longer seems to be doing so, as evidenced by the presence of the dark mud within. Thinking of the people of Chenyu Vale as related to the chasm, I feel like there's definitely some connection to its proximity to Fontaine, an association with the nameless god Fujin and Herblord served that could flood the Bishui River with their powers, and the mysterious upside-down fountain in the chasm that I'm convinced is connected to the primordial sea in some way, but it's still just a tentative hunch on my part. One theory, as this god in Chenyu Vale was considered an evil god by Rex Lapis and his followers, is that the god they followed was the Che, sealed beneath a mountain in the neighboring Qingsa village, and as it was described as a sea monster of some sort, I think that has at least some weight to it. Obviously, no confirmation yet either way. As usual, we're here being led by the nose with celestial nails and very little payoff, but the breadcrumbs are at least something. Next up on the agenda is a favorite topic of mine, but look, just stop right now and listen. See, I'm super professional over here, and I would never let my fanboyism slip out of my pockets like 1,000 Polaroids, and they would definitely not all be of Baiju. Those aren't mine. Anyway, next on the agenda, the enigmatic Herblord. I heard from several people deep in the bowels of Twitter, a place where one should never venture without proper protective gear, just like most places in the real world these days, that there was an all-out wiki editor war going on over a simple fact, and that simple fact is more or less written in stone now. Changsheng is Herblord, the Adeptus who is besties with Ling Yuan and Fujin. There, debate over. I'm being serious, by the way. You guys who are longtime followers of this channel know how meticulous I am about trying my very best to avoid using absolute language to talk about unproven theories. I'm always going to try, at the very least, to follow up my thoughts with a, this is the most likely thing I can figure, but it's still unconfirmed. Honestly, this incident just brings to light a larger issue regarding media literacy these days, and that's a whole other topic that this channel isn't equipped to handle. But basically, a lot of media that is not from the West is going to leave you with a lot of information that you might consider untied ends, but they're not. With Changsheng and Herblord, we are given all of the pieces. But the thing about Chinese literature is that, especially in fantasy stories, your intelligence is going to be respected very, very, very acutely. That is to say that you may often find yourself having to come to the intended conclusion without being told with literal writing on the wall what the answer to your question is. Hoyoverse is extremely good at this, or maybe just really likes to do this, as some people might argue the quality of their context clues and their placements, which is totally fair. Okay, one of the things we know about Changsheng from Baiju's character stories and his story quest is the fact that when asked what she'd do if he refused her contract, she answered by saying that she'd spend her final moments sleeping on Mount Yaojun, her abode in Chenyu Vale and where the first one who accepted her contract found her, and dreaming of reuniting with her friends. Her friends being Fujin, presumed dead just as she herself was, and Ling Yuan. They even talk at the end of Chenyu Vale world quests about Herblord, who was basically cut to bits in her fight against their god when they defected in order to save the people of the Vale. Death isn't permanent for a lot of immortal type beings in Teyvat. We know for a fact that Fujin survived her death and was able to simply reform many years later with diminished powers, and they talk about Herblord finding a home in Liyue Harbor. Just who else could it possibly be? There's no way we wouldn't already have some knowledge of a white snake adeptus in the city if it was some other snake whose whole shtick was being a gifted healer. When discussing their ability to take human form, Ling Yuan mentions that she didn't think it was too weird that Herblord spent a lot of time in her human form, simply as her ambition was healing ailments for humans and she needed the articulation of delicate human fingers for that work. Anyway, I'm holding out hopium that the connections between Changsheng and her two friends means that Baiju might get a Part 2 story quest someday soonish. I thought it was absolutely criminal that he didn't appear for any of the Chenyu Vale story, as he's the character most associated with the area aside from Ga Ming. Please, he's my favorite Hoyoverse. I'm begging you to let him out of the basement, and Albedo can come too, right? I'm really unlucky picking faves, as you can see. I feel like left and right, Chenyu Vale left us with teasing little leads that pointed us towards the heavens and the ancient past, despite not giving us many strong conclusions. After seeing the cutscene on Chiwang Terrace, I can't help but feel like something so grand and massive, visible from all around, must have something to do with a direct connection to Celestia, especially due to its location, which is very nearly directly under the floating landmass above. We hear mention in this quest of a giant slab of jade and how once there was a place here where the Adepti and envoys of the heavens could communicate directly with Celestia. I feel like it's pretty strongly hinted that this giant slab of jade, now just used for ceremonies to stabilize the ley lines, simply fell out of use, its secrets and original purpose forgotten. After firing a massive beam of light to summon magical rain into the heavens and getting no response, I'm thinking more and more that the heavenly principles might be all there is up there, and whether or not they're still active or around even, well, nobody's heard anything for 500 years. What does it mean for our story if there really is no one at home up there? Was Focalor's sacrifice for nothing? Is that a curse or a blessing in disguise? At the end, I can only see this being that we met at the start of our journey as being where it has to end. But along with the darker turns in the narrative, maybe the reality is even more disturbing. If the world's been left on autopilot in Celestia's absence, then just what are the Archons upholding? What contract is keeping Zhongli from telling us more? Chenyu Vale is the first step on our path to Natlan, though we still have a few patches left in Fontaine to fill in some blanks. I have a feeling we will yet again be left craving more. While I was hoping for more information, I have to remember just how much of a lore bomb was already dropped on us in the main Archon quests and Nervalet's story and voice lines. Overall, I feel like Chenyu Vale is a setup for something greater that will come later, and as much as everyone hates to wait, I'm sure the payoff will be worth it eventually. Thanks for sticking with me to the end of the video. Be sure to check out the links in the description below and follow me over on Twitter for more bite-sized lore and just general Hoyoverse posting. I talk about everything from my terrible gacha luck to my triumphs in Abyss, and there are occasional cute pet photos and dad jokes. Some of my theory threads often end up being the basis for some of my videos, so just by following me over there, you're getting sneak peeks. Anyway, please support the channel if you can, and thank you so much for the support you guys always show me. I really appreciate it. This is, as always, the Hexen Circle signing off. I hope you'll join me on my next adventure.